Starving dog trapped and begging for help. But what happened next left everyone speechless. Sarah Mitchell wasn't planning to take a different route home that autumn evening. At 58, she had settled into comfortable routines, teaching piano to neighborhood children and tending to her small garden in suburban Connecticut. But road construction forced her to detour through an older part of town she rarely visited. The streets here were lined with deteriorating houses, many with boarded windows and overgrown yards. As she drove slowly past a particularly run-down property, something caught her attention, a weak, plaintive whimper. Sarah pulled over, her heart racing. In the fading daylight, she could make out a shape near the front gate of an abandoned house. Drawing closer, she gasped. A dog was tethered to the gate with a heavy chain, its ribs visible through matted, dirty fur. "Oh, you poor thing," she whispered, approaching carefully. The dog, which appeared to be a mixed breed with light brown fur, lifted its head weakly. Despite its obvious suffering, its tail gave a slight wag. The scene broke Sarah's heart. Empty food containers and a dirty water bowl lay just out of the dog's reach. The chain was so short the animal could barely lie down. The house behind it had clearly been empty for months, with newspaper-covered windows and a foreclosure notice on the door. "How long have you been here?" Sarah murmured, kneeling at a safe distance. The dog's eyes, though tired, held no aggression, only a desperate plea for help. Its fur was filthy and tangled, and Sarah could see wounds where the chain had rubbed against its neck. Taking out her phone, Sarah first called the local police department. "I need to report an abandoned dog," she explained, describing the situation and location. Then she called her veterinarian, Dr. Thompson, who had cared for her own pets for years. "Don't try to remove the chain yourself," Dr. Thompson advised. "The dog might be frightened or injured. Wait for animal control, but stay with it if you can. The poor thing's probably terrified." Sarah retrieved a bottle of water and some dog treats from her car. She always kept them handy for her neighbor's friendly golden retriever. Sitting on the ground at a respectful distance, she spoke softly to the dog. "Help is coming, sweetheart. You're not alone anymore." The dog watched her with wary hope, accepting the water she carefully poured into the dirty bowl. Its tail wagged slightly with each gentle word, though its body remained tense and fearful. As darkness fell, Sarah used her phone's flashlight to better assess the dog's condition. It was smaller than she'd first thought, probably around 40 pounds when healthy, though now significantly underweight. Despite its deplorable condition, she could see the gentle soul in its eyes. Neighbors began to emerge from nearby houses, curious about Sarah's presence. An elderly man approached slowly, leaning on a cane. "That dog's been there at least 2 weeks, he said, shaking his head. "Family got evicted. Heard them fighting about it one night. Next morning they were gone, left the dog behind. I've been throwing food when I could, but couldn't get close enough to help much." Sarah felt anger rising at the cruelty of abandoning an animal this way, but she kept her voice calm for the dog's sake. "Thank you for trying to help. Animal control is on the way now." The wait seemed endless, but Sarah refused to leave. She talked continuously to the dog, telling stories about her students, her garden, anything to maintain a soothing atmosphere. Gradually, the dog's rigid posture relaxed slightly, though its eyes remained fixed on her, as if afraid she too would disappear. When the animal control vehicle finally arrived, its lights casting strange shadows in the gathering darkness, the dog cowered. Sarah's heart ached at its fear. The animal control officer, a woman named Melanie Torres, approached the scene with practiced caution. Her 15 years of experience had taught her to handle such situations delicately. "Thank you for staying with the dog," Melanie said quietly to Sarah. "Can you tell me what you know?" While Sarah explained the situation, Melanie assessed the dog from a distance. The animal watched them with tired eyes, but showed no signs of aggression. "Poor baby's definitely been here a while," Melanie observed, noting the worn patch of earth where the dog had been forced to sleep. "The good news is, the female seems responsive to human presence." "That's promising." Melanie retrieved her equipment with slow, deliberate movements. I'm going to need your help, if you're willing, she told Sarah. Sometimes having the person they've already bonded with nearby helps keep them calm. Sarah nodded, following Melanie's instructions carefully. They worked together under the beam of flashlights held by concerned neighbors who had gathered to watch. Talk to her, Melanie encouraged as she prepared to approach. Keep her attention on your voice. Sarah sat where the dog could see her clearly and spoke in soothing tones. You're such a good girl. We're going to help you now. Everything's going to be okay. The dog's tail gave a slight wag at Sarah's voice, even as she watched Melanie's approach warily. Melanie worked with gentle efficiency, first offering treats to build trust. The dog, though initially hesitant, eventually accepted them, her hunger overcoming her fear. The chain secured with a padlock, Melanie announced, examining the restraint. I'll need to use bolt cutters. This might frighten her. Sarah moved closer, still talking softly. You're so brave, sweetie. Just a little longer. The sound of the bolt cutters made the dog flinch, but she remained surprisingly calm, as if understanding help had finally arrived. When the chain fell away, Melanie carefully examined the dog's neck. There's some infection where the chain rubbed, she reported, but it's not as severe as I've seen. She'll need immediate medical attention though. Getting the dog into the transport carrier was the next challenge. She was too weak to walk properly, her muscles atrophied from weeks of confinement. I can't believe anyone could do this, Sarah murmured, fighting back tears as she helped Melanie lift the emaciated dog. The good news is, she's found her guardian angel. Melanie smiled at Sarah. Would you like to follow us to the emergency vet? Dr. Carson is expecting us. Sarah didn't hesitate. Of course, I want to make sure she's okay. The emergency veterinary clinic was quiet when they arrived. Dr. Carson, a kind-faced woman in her 40s, was waiting at the entrance. Let's get her inside and assessed, she said, helping them transfer the carrier into an examination room. The initial examination revealed the extent of the dog's condition. She was severely undernourished, dehydrated, and had various infections. However, Dr. Carson remained optimistic. Despite everything, her vital signs are surprisingly strong, she reported. She's a fighter. We'll start her on fluids and antibiotics tonight. The next 48 hours will be crucial. As the medical team worked, Sarah found herself unable to leave. She sat in the waiting room, filling out paperwork with Melanie. The dog would officially be in the custody of animal control, but Sarah couldn't shake the connection she felt. Would it be possible, she began hesitantly, to be considered as a foster home once she's stable? Melanie smiled warmly. I was hoping you'd ask. We'll need to do a home check and paperwork, but given how she's responded to you, I think it would be perfect. Around midnight, Dr. Carson emerged with an update. She's resting comfortably now. We've cleaned her wounds, started treatment, and she's on 4 fluids. She's also been scanned for a microchip. Nothing found. Does she? Sarah paused. I mean, do we know how old she is? Based on her teeth and general condition, I'd estimate around 2 years old. She's young, which works in her favor for recovery. Before leaving, Sarah was allowed to briefly see the dog. In the clean hospital kennel on soft blankets, with the matted fur cleaned away from her face, she looked different. Her eyes, though tired, held a spark of hope. I'll be back tomorrow, Sarah promised softly. You rest now, sweet girl. On the drive home, Sarah's mind was already racing with plans. Her house had a fenced yard, perfect for a dog to recover and eventually play. She'd need supplies, but that could wait until they knew more about the dog's condition. As she pulled into her driveway, her phone pinged with a message from Melanie. She ate a little bit of food. Good sign. Thank you for caring enough to stop. Sarah smiled through her tears. Sometimes she thought taking a different route could change not just one life, but 2. The next few days established a new routine for Sarah. Each morning, she'd visit the clinic before her first piano student, and each evening, she'd return after her last lesson. The dog, whom the clinic staff had started calling Hope, showed small but steady improvements. Her blood work is looking better, Dr. Carson reported on the third day. The antibiotics are fighting the infection well, and she's keeping food down. She's still very weak, but she's responding to treatment better than we expected. Sarah spent her free time preparing for Hope's eventual homecoming. She visited pet stores, consulting with staff about the best supplies for a recovering dog. Her shopping cart filled with soft beds, gentle cleaning supplies, and easily digestible food recommended by Dr. Carson. The home check is scheduled for tomorrow, Melanie told her during one of her visits to the clinic. But I'm not worried. Your setup sounds perfect for rehabilitation. On day 5, Sarah arrived at the clinic to find Hope sitting up in her kennel, rather than lying down. When she saw Sarah, her tail wagged with more energy than before. Someone's feeling better, Dar. Carson smiled. Would you like to sit with her for a while? She could use some gentle interaction. In the quiet examination room, Sarah sat on the floor while Hope cautiously explored the space. The dog's movements were still uncertain, her body learning to trust its freedom again. But there was a newfound curiosity in her eyes. She's gaining weight already, Dr. Carson noted. About 2 pounds since she arrived. We're introducing small amounts of solid food now, along with the liquid nutrition. Sarah noticed other changes too. Hope's fur, though still patchy, looked cleaner and healthier where it wasn't shaved for treatment. The wounds on her neck were healing, leaving scars that would fade with time. Most notably, her eyes had lost that desperate, haunted look. By the end of the first week, Hope was strong enough to walk short distances. Sarah brought her a soft collar and leash, introducing them gradually as Dr. Carson had suggested. The physical wounds are healing well, Dr. Carson explained during their daily consultation. But remember, the emotional recovery will take longer. She'll need patience and consistency. The home check went smoothly. Melanie approved Sarah's preparations, particularly noting the quiet, secure environment she'd created. I think we can arrange for her discharge in a few days, Melanie said. You'll need to continue her medical treatments, and there will be follow-up appointments, but she's ready for the next step in her recovery. Sarah spent the weekend preparing her house. She set up Hope's bed in a quiet corner of the living room, where she could see everything but still feel secure. She installed baby gates to create safe spaces and removed anything that might frighten a nervous dog. Finally, 10 days after that fateful evening, it was time for Hope to leave the clinic. Dr. Carson provided detailed instructions for her ongoing care, medication schedules, feeding guidelines, and exercise restrictions. Take it slow, she advised. Let her set the pace. She'll tell you what she's ready for. The car ride home was a tense 15 minutes. Hope sat quietly in her crate in the back seat, watching the world pass by through the windows. Sarah kept her voice soft and reassuring, explaining everything they passed. That's going to be your new park when you're stronger, she said, driving past the neighborhood green space. And here we are. This is home. Sarah carried Hope's crate into the house, setting it down in the living room. She opened the door but didn't force Hope to come out, remembering Dr. Carson's advice about letting her adjust at her own pace. It took almost an hour before Hope ventured out of the crate. She moved cautiously, sniffing every corner of her new space. Sarah sat quietly on the floor, pretending to read but watching Hope's exploration. The first breakthrough came when Hope approached Sarah's outstretched hand, giving it a gentle sniff before retreating to her bed. It was a small gesture, but it felt like a victory. That first night, Sarah slept on the couch to be near Hope. Around midnight, she woke to the sound of soft whimpers. Hope was having a nightmare, her legs twitching in her sleep. You're safe now, Sarah whispered, not touching her but letting her voice provide comfort. No one will hurt you again. The whimpers subsided, and Hope's breathing settled. In the quiet darkness, Sarah made a silent promise to this brave dog who had survived so much. We'll take this journey together, one day at a time. The first few weeks with Hope brought both challenges and small victories. Sarah quickly learned to recognize the subtle signs of Hope's emotional state, The slight tail tucks when uncertain, the gentle head tilts when curious, and the gradually increasing moments of relaxation. Each day followed a careful routine, something Dr. Carson had emphasized would help Hope feel secure. Mornings began with gentle words and quiet movements. Sarah would sit near Hope's bed, talking softly while preparing her medication and breakfast. "Good morning, sweet girl," she'd say, maintaining a calm presence as Hope gradually grew comfortable eating with someone nearby. "We've got another good day ahead of us." Sarah had temporarily rearranged her piano teaching schedule, moving most lessons online to give Hope time to adjust. The few students who still came to the house were briefed on how to behave around the recovering dog. Emma, a 12-year-old student who'd been taking lessons for years, proved particularly understanding. "My mom says Hope is like a flower," she whispered during one lesson, watching the dog doze in her bed. "She needs lots of love and patience to bloom." Physical healing continued steadily. Hope's fur began growing back properly, covering the bare patches where matted clumps had been shaved. Her ribs became less prominent as she gained weight, and her eyes grew brighter with each passing day. The emotional healing, however, moved at its own pace. Certain sounds would send Hope retreating to her safe corner, car doors slamming, raised voices from passing neighbors, the rattle of chains from passing bicycles. Sarah learned to anticipate these triggers and provide reassurance. One significant breakthrough came during their third week together. Sarah was reading on the couch when Hope, for the first time, voluntarily approached and sat beside her. Not touching, but close enough to feel each other's presence. "Hello, beautiful," Sarah said softly, continuing to read while her heart soared at this show of trust. Hope stayed for nearly 10 minutes before returning to her bed, but it marked a turning point. Dr. Thompson, Sarah's regular vet, had taken over Hope's ongoing care. During their second checkup, she noticed the change in Hope's demeanor. "She's carrying herself differently," she observed. "More confidence in her movements. And did you notice? She's making eye contact now." Sarah had noticed. Those soulful brown eyes that once held only fear now showed glimmers of curiosity and even joy, especially during their gentle play sessions in the backyard. These outdoor moments became special times for both of them. Hope, who initially stayed close to the back door, gradually began exploring the fenced yard. Sarah would sit on the patio, offering quiet encouragement as Hope discovered the joys of sniffing flowers and watching birds. "You're doing so well," Sarah would tell her, celebrating each small victory. The first time Hope played with a soft toy, her first bark at a squirrel, the first time she wagged her tail without hesitation. The neighborhood gradually became aware of Hope's story. People would stop during their walks, asking about her progress. Sarah appreciated their interest but was careful to maintain boundaries, ensuring Hope never felt overwhelmed. Mrs. Henderson, an elderly neighbor who had lost her own dog the previous year, became a regular visitor. She would sit quietly in the garden with Sarah, sometimes bringing treats that Dr. Thompson had approved. "There's something special about saving a life," Mrs. Henderson said one afternoon, watching Hope investigate a butterfly. "It heals both ways, doesn't it?" Sarah knew exactly what she meant. Her own life had changed in unexpected ways since that fateful evening. Her days had new purpose, her routine revolving around Hope's needs and celebrating her progress. The nightmares gradually became less frequent, though they didn't disappear entirely. When they came, Sarah would softly play the piano, letting gentle melodies fill the house until Hope settled again. 1 month after bringing Hope home, Sarah received a call from Melanie at Animal Control. They had finally tracked down Hope's previous owners through veterinary records. "They've been charged with animal cruelty," Melanie reported. "They won't be allowed to own animals again. And," she paused, "they've surrendered all rights to Hope. Would you be interested in making her adoption official?" Sarah looked at Hope, who was curled up in a sunbeam, her favorite toy tucked against her side. The transformation from that terrified, chained dog to this gradually blossoming creature was remarkable. "Yes," Sarah replied without hesitation. She's already home. That evening, as they sat together in the garden watching the sunset, Sarah reflected on their journey so far. Hope had moved closer over the weeks, and now lay with her head gently resting against Sarah's leg. A sign of trust that would have seemed impossible not long ago. "We're just getting started, sweet girl," Sarah whispered, carefully stroking Hope's soft fur. "We have so many good days ahead." As summer approached, Sarah noticed something interesting about Hope's behavior. During their morning walks, which they had recently started, Hope would always hesitate at a particular intersection, her attention drawn to a street they never took. One morning, Sarah decided to follow Hope's instinct. With gentle encouragement, they turned down Maple Street, a quiet residential area lined with modest homes. Hope's pace quickened slightly, her nose working overtime as she sniffed the familiar territory. They hadn't gone far when Hope stopped in front of a small blue house. Her body language changed immediately, tail tucked, ears back, but still intensely focused on the property. "Is this from your past, sweet girl?" Sarah wondered aloud, her heart aching as she realized this might have been Hope's original home, before she ended up chained and abandoned. An elderly woman was working in the front garden. Looking up, she noticed them and froze, her hand going to her mouth. "Oh my, is that Sophie?" Hope's ears perked up at the name, though she stayed close to Sarah's side. The woman slowly stood, keeping her movements careful. "I used to live next door to the family that had her. They called her Sophie. I've wondered for months what happened to her." Sarah introduced herself and explained how she'd found Hope. The woman, who introduced herself as Martha Wilson, invited them to sit on her porch, maintaining a respectful distance from Hope. "Those people moved in about 2 years ago," Martha explained, her voice tight with emotion. "They got Sophie as a puppy. I used to watch her play in their yard. Such a sweet thing. But then things changed. The husband lost his job, they started fighting a lot. Sophie spent more and more time outside, no matter the weather." Sarah listened intently, while keeping a comforting hand on Hope, who had settled at her feet but remained alert. "I called animal control twice," Martha continued, wiping her eyes. "But they always had excuses ready when the officers came. Then one day they just disappeared. I never knew what happened to Sophie. I felt guilty ever since." "You tried to help," Sarah assured her. "And she's safe now." Martha smiled sadly. "She looks so different, healthier, despite everything. Sophie was always such a gentle soul. Even when they neglected her, she never became mean." As if understanding she was being discussed, Hope lifted her head and looked at Martha. There was no fear in her eyes now, just a quiet recognition. "Would it be okay if I gave her a treat?" Martha asked. "I still keep dog biscuits for the neighborhood pups." Sarah nodded, and Martha slowly offered a biscuit. Hope carefully took it, her tail giving a small wag. This encounter opened a new chapter in Hope's recovery. Knowing her background helped Sarah better understand some of her behaviors. Her preference for being indoors during thunderstorms, her initial reluctance to eat from metal bowls, her special love of soft blankets. Dr. Thompson had additional insights during their next checkup. "Dogs are incredibly resilient," she explained, watching Hope confidently explore the exam room, a far cry from her first nervous visits. "But they don't forget. They just learn to trust again when shown consistency and love." The visit to her old neighborhood seemed to help Hope move forward. It was as if seeing her past from a position of safety allowed her to let go of some fears. She became more playful, more confident in new situations. Sarah's piano students noticed the change too. Hope no longer retreated to her bed during lessons but would often lie near the piano, seeming to enjoy the music. Some pieces appeared to be her favorites. She would wag her tail to Beethoven's Für Elise, and always grew relaxed during Debussy. One evening, while Sarah was teaching 8-year-old Tommy, Hope did something unprecedented. As the boy struggled with a difficult passage, growing frustrated, Hope got up and gently placed her head on his knee. Tommy giggled, relaxed, and played the section perfectly. "Hope's a good teacher too," Tommy declared proudly. Word of Hope's story and recovery spread through the community. Local animal advocates asked Sarah to share their story at a fundraising event for the animal shelter. Though Sarah was hesitant about exposing Hope to a crowd, Dr. Thompson encouraged it. "She's ready," the vet assured her. "She's not that frightened dog anymore, and her story might help other animals in need." Martha became a regular visitor, sometimes joining Sarah and Hope on their morning walks. "You know," she said one morning, watching Hope chase a butterfly in the park, "I used to think I failed her, but seeing her now, I realize her journey led her exactly where she needed to be." Sarah understood what Martha meant. Every day, Hope showed her that healing wasn't just about recovering from past hurts. It was about building something new, something better. That evening, as Hope lounged on the couch, her new favorite spot, Sarah noticed something remarkable. The dog who once flinched at every sound was now sleeping peacefully, even as a thunderstorm rolled in outside. Trust, Sarah realized, wasn't just given, it was rebuilt day by day, moment by moment. The local animal shelter's fundraising event turned out to be a turning point, not just for Hope, but for the entire community. Sarah had prepared a simple presentation, including before and after photos of Hope, but it was Hope's presence that made the real impact. Dressed in a soft purple bandana, Hope gracefully navigated the crowd at the community center, staying close to Sarah but showing none of her former fear. When Sarah shared their story, there wasn't a dry eye in the room. "The thing about Hope," Sarah explained to the attendees, "is that she never lost her capacity to love, despite everything she went through. She taught me that resilience isn't about pretending the past didn't happen. It's about choosing to move forward anyway." Among the audience was Jessica Martinez, a local reporter who asked to feature Hope's story in the newspaper. "We need more stories like this," she explained. "Not just about animal rescue, but about healing and community." The article, when it appeared, sparked something unexpected in their small town. The shelter reported a surge in adoption inquiries, particularly for older dogs and those with special needs. But more than that, people began reaching out to Sarah with their own stories. One Sunday morning, a car pulled up outside Sarah's house. A teenage girl stepped out, holding a leash attached to a timid-looking beagle mix. "I'm sorry to just show up," the girl said nervously. "I'm Amy. I read about Hope in the paper. I found this dog behind our school. She's been there for days. I didn't know what to do, but then I read your story." Sarah called Melanie, who arrived quickly to assess the situation. The beagle, later named Lucky, became the first of many animals that found their way to help because of Hope's story. Hope seemed to have a special sense about other rescued animals. When Lucky stayed temporarily at Sarah's house while waiting for a foster home, Hope showed remarkable patience, sharing her toys and even her favorite sunny spot by the window. "She's paying it forward," Mrs. Henderson observed, watching Hope gently encourage Lucky to play. "She remembers what it's like to need a friend." Sarah's piano studio became known as a safe space, not just for music students, but for anyone needing a moment of peace. Hope developed an uncanny ability to sense when someone needed comfort. During lessons, she would often lie near students who were having a difficult day, her presence somehow making the music flow more easily. One particularly meaningful connection formed with Michael, a new student with autism who struggled with traditional lessons. His mother had read about Hope and wondered if music therapy might help her son. During Michael's first lesson, Hope immediately sensed his anxiety. She calmly lay nearby, not demanding attention but remaining present. When Michael became overwhelmed by a challenging piece, Hope's gentle presence helped him regulate his emotions. "This is the first time he's felt comfortable in a new place," his mother said tearfully after the lesson. "Something about Hope just speaks to him." The library took notice of Hope's calming effect and invited Sarah to bring her to their children's reading program. Hope would lie quietly while kids read to her, her non-judgmental presence helping struggling readers gain confidence. "She's like a therapy dog without the official title," the children's librarian remarked, watching a young boy who usually struggled with reading confidently share a story with Hope. Martha, who had known Hope as Sophie, became a regular volunteer at the shelter. Hope's story opened my eyes, she explained. I can't change what happened before, but I can help make a difference now. The community began to change in subtle ways. People became more aware of animal welfare issues. The local pet store stopped selling from puppy mills and started hosting adoption events instead. The town council passed stricter animal welfare ordinances. Hope's influence extended beyond animal welfare. Her story of recovery and resilience resonated with people facing their own challenges. A local counselor even asked Sarah if Hope could occasionally visit their support group for trauma survivors. Animals can teach us so much about healing, the counselor explained. Hope's story shows that past trauma doesn't define our future. 1 year after finding Hope, Sarah organized a celebration in the park. It wasn't just about Hope's recovery anymore. It was about celebrating the community that had formed around her story. Rescued dogs and their adopters gathered for a peaceful afternoon of sharing stories and support. Hope moved confidently through the gathering, greeting old friends and new ones with equal grace. The fearful dog who once huddled in a corner was now a confident, gentle soul who helped others find their strength. You know what amazes me most? Melanie said, watching Hope play with a group of children. It's not just that she healed. It's how many others she's helped heal along the way. Sarah understood exactly what she meant. Hope's journey had created ripples that continued to spread, touching lives in ways she never could have imagined that rainy night when she first found a chained dog in need of help. The autumn brought unexpected challenges that would test both Hope and Sarah. It began with a routine evening walk, now a comfortable part of their daily routine. Hope had grown confident enough to greet other dogs politely, and her fear of strangers had largely subsided. But that evening, a car backfired loudly just as they passed the park. Hope, startled by the sudden noise, bolted. Despite Sarah's firm grip on the leash, the force of Hope's panic pulled the handle from her grasp. In seconds, Hope disappeared into the growing dusk. Hope! Sarah's voice echoed through the quiet streets. Her heart raced as she ran in the direction she'd last seen her dog. The sun was setting, casting long shadows across the neighborhood. Sarah's hands trembled as she called Melanie. Within 30 minutes, a small search party had formed. Martha brought flashlights, Mrs. Henderson started calling other neighbors, and several of Sarah's piano students and their parents joined the search. Remember, Melanie advised the group, she's scared, not lost. She knows this area. Don't chase her if you see her. Call Sarah immediately. The community mobilized quickly. Jessica, the reporter who had covered Hope's story, posted alerts on local social media groups. The library staff, who had grown fond of Hope during her reading sessions, stayed late to help search the surrounding blocks. Hours passed. The temperature dropped, and a light drizzle began to fall. Sarah's throat was raw from calling Hope's name, but she refused to give up. This was her greatest fear, that Hope would be alone and scared again, thinking she had been abandoned. She'll find her way back, Martha assured Sarah, though worry lined her face. She's not the same frightened dog she used to be. Around midnight, Sarah's phone rang. It was Michael's mother, the boy with autism who had connected so deeply with Hope during his piano lessons. Michael couldn't sleep, worried about Hope, she explained. He remembered something. During his last lesson, Hope kept going to the window and looking at the old Anderson house, the vacant one at the end of Oak Street. Michael thinks she liked watching the squirrels there. The Anderson house was a Victorian property that had been empty for months, its garden overgrown. Sarah and several others hurried there, their flashlights cutting through the rain. Hope? Sarah called softly, approaching the house. It's okay, sweet girl. You're safe. A faint whimper came from beneath the porch. Sarah got down on her hands and knees, shining her light into the darkness. Two brown eyes reflected back Hope had indeed sought shelter there. But getting her out proved challenging. The space was tight, and Hope's old fears seemed to have resurfaces. She stayed just out of reach, trembling. Let me try something, Michael's mother said. She pulled out her phone and played a recording of Michael practicing piano, the Debussy piece that Hope always seemed to love. The familiar music drifted through the rain. Gradually, Hope's trembling subsided. Sarah kept talking softly, remembering those first days of building trust. "It's okay to be scared," she whispered. "But I'm here now. I'll always come find you." Finally, after what seemed like hours, Hope inched forward. When she emerged, she pressed against Sarah's legs, her whole body shaking. The leash still trailed behind her, muddy but intact. "Let's go home," Sarah said softly, gathering Hope in her arms despite the mud and rain. Neighbors who had joined the search wiped away tears, touched by the reunion. The next few days revealed the incident's impact. Hope became clingy, following Sarah from room to room. The progress they'd made seemed to have taken a step backward. Hope startled at loud noises again and showed anxiety during walks. "This is normal," Dr. Thompson assured them during a checkup. "Think of it as an emotional sprain. Like a physical injury, it needs time and proper care to heal." The community rallied around them once again. Martha brought over calming treats she'd learned to make in her shelter volunteer work. Mrs. Henderson spent afternoons in Sarah's garden, providing quiet company while Hope readjusted. Michael's mother called with an unexpected suggestion. "Michael would like to share something with Hope," she said. "He knows what it's like to feel overwhelmed and scared." During his next lesson, Michael brought a weighted blanket similar to the one he used when feeling anxious. Hope immediately took to it, seeming to find comfort in its gentle pressure. Gradually, Hope began to regain her confidence. Sarah noticed something different this time. Hope would look to her for reassurance during uncertain moments, rather than trying to flee. Their bond had grown stronger through the challenge. "She knows now that being scared doesn't mean being alone," Melanie observed during a visit. "That's huge progress." The experience changed Sarah too. She'd always known she loved Hope, but the frantic hours of searching had revealed the depth of their connection. She also gained a deeper appreciation for their community, how quickly people had mobilized to help, how genuinely they cared. 1 month after the incident, Hope made a breakthrough. During their walk, another car backfired. Hope startled, but instead of running, she pressed against Sarah's leg, looking up for reassurance. When Sarah remained calm, Hope relaxed too. That evening, as they sat in their favorite spot on the porch, Sarah reflected on their journey. Hope dozed beside her, peaceful under her weighted blanket despite the distant rumble of thunder. "We all get scared sometimes," Sarah murmured, stroking Hope's ears. "The brave part is letting others help us feel safe again." As winter approached, Sarah received an unexpected call from Melanie at the shelter. "Remember how Hope's story inspired so many adoptions? Well, we have a situation that made me think of you both." A senior dog had been found abandoned in conditions similar to Hope's. The dog, a gray-muzzled golden retriever mix named Charlie, was physically healthy but emotionally shut down. "Would you and Hope consider helping?" Melanie asked. "Sometimes it takes one who's been there to show the way forward." Sarah discussed it with Dr. Thompson, who supported the idea. "Hope's not just stable now, she's thriving. This could be good for both dogs." The first meeting was arranged carefully. They used the shelter's quiet room, where Hope had once taken her first steps toward recovery. Charlie huddled in a corner, showing the same fear and distrust Hope had once displayed. What happened next amazed everyone. Hope, who usually waited for other dogs to approach her, walked carefully toward Charlie. She lay down a few feet away, not demanding interaction but offering quiet companionship. It was exactly what Sarah had done for Hope all those months ago. "She remembers," Melanie whispered, watching the interaction. "She's speaking his language." Over the next few weeks, Sarah and Hope visited Charlie regularly. Hope seemed to know exactly what he needed, when to offer playful encouragement and when to simply be present. Charlie began to respond, first with tiny tail wags, then with tentative play bows. The shelter staff noticed Charlie watching the door on days when Hope was expected. His transformation, while not as dramatic as Hope's had been, showed steady progress. He began to trust the shelter workers, accepted gentle pets, and even started playing with toys. Sarah's piano students became invested in Charlie's recovery. They would ask for updates during their lessons, and some even joined Sarah and Hope on their shelter visits. Tommy, who had recently performed in his first recital, asked if he could play for both dogs. Music helped Hope feel better, he reasoned. Maybe it will help Charlie too. The impromptu concert in the shelter's quiet room became a weekly tradition. Other children joined in, bringing their own instruments. The shelter started seeing more families visiting, drawn by the sound of music and the story of two healing dogs. As Charlie improved, the search began for his forever home. Sarah briefly considered adopting him herself, but knew Hope was happiest as an only dog. The right match appeared in an unexpected way. Mrs. Henderson, who had been alone since losing her own dog, had grown increasingly involved in Charlie's recovery. She would often accompany Sarah and Hope on their shelter visits, sitting quietly and offering gentle words of encouragement. "I wasn't looking for another dog," she admitted to Sarah one day, "but watching Hope help Charlie heal, it reminded me that there's always room for more love." The adoption process went smoothly. Charlie's transition to Mrs. Henderson's home was aided by his friendship with Hope. Having them living just 3 houses apart proved perfect, close enough for regular playdates but allowing each dog their own space to continue growing. The success of Hope and Charlie's story led to something bigger. The shelter, with support from the community, established a formal program pairing rescued dogs with stable former rescues for rehabilitation. They called it Hope's Heroes. Sarah found herself becoming an advocate for this approach. She spoke at animal welfare conferences, sharing how Hope's journey had not only transformed one dog's life, but had created a ripple effect throughout the community. The local elementary school invited Hope to participate in their humane education program. Children learned about empathy and resilience through Hope's story. She would sit calmly as Sarah explained how kindness can change lives, occasionally offering a gentle paw or soft nuzzle to an attentive student. 2 years after that rainy night when Sarah first found Hope, they sat together in their garden, watching the sunset. Charlie and Mrs. Henderson had joined them for their regular evening visit. The 2 dogs played gently in the yard, their gray muzzles testament to their age but their spirits young and free. Sometimes, Mrs. Henderson observed, "The best things in life come from the hardest beginnings." Sarah watched as Hope paused in her play to check on Charlie, just as she had done since their first meeting. The fearful dog she'd found chained in the rain was now a confident, compassionate soul who helped others find their way out of darkness. The weekend brought another celebration, the first anniversary of Hope's Heroes. The community gathered in the park where Hope had once fled in fear. Now, she moved confidently through the crowd, greeting old friends and new rescues alike. Charlie stayed close by, his own transformation inspiring others. As Sarah watched Hope gently encourage a newly rescued dog to join in a game, she remembered something Dr. Thompson had said early in their journey. Healing isn't just about getting better. It's about becoming who you were always meant to be. Hope had certainly proven that. She had transformed from a victim of cruelty into a beacon of hope for others. But more than that, she had shown an entire community the power of patience, love, and second chances. That evening, as Hope dozed contentedly on her favorite spot on the couch, Sarah played a gentle melody on the piano, the same Debussy piece that had so often soothed Hope's fears. But now it wasn't a song of comfort. It was a celebration of how far they'd come.